Welcome everyone. It is IKYA Live, world news from the spiritual perspective, and the only news program in the world giving you practical spiritual advice for your everyday life. How do we do that? We take a news topic of the day and we unpack it, and then IKYA lifts our perspective and looks at the spiritual principles playing out in the events happening in the world around us. IKYA Live is a unique news program in that it's a discussion. And it requires then your engagement, your questions, your comments, also your perspective. It's there that we can kind of really go deep and also figure out for ourselves how to best learn and grow from the events happening in the world around us and apply it to our spiritual growth process. So please like and subscribe down below our YouTube channel, ikya.official. Like this video and share it on already now to anybody in your life who might benefit from this discussion tonight. Also, follow us and share our Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook, ikya.official. So, tonight's topic, many experience it as a very heavy topic, and many of us have both personal experience or know people in our lives who have been dealing with suicide. And suicide is a slowly growing epidemic in the sense that the numbers are increasing over time, but they're particularly focused in the Western world. More people take their own life in the developed countries, and a growing trend is that more men take their own life, and perhaps most sort of concerning of all is in the recent years, more and more younger men are taking their life. IKYA will unpack all of this further, but it all points to a shift in the consciousness on the planet and is directly related to spirituality. That's why we felt this topic was so important to bring into IKYA Live tonight. So with that, we'll turn it over to IKYA by basically asking what's the state of play with suicide, and then we'll talk about solutions and a whole bunch of stuff. We'll let IKYA start unpacking now.
Suicide is an interesting topic because it, for many people, feels so unnatural, right, that someone would end their lives. And we will unpack it because in our part of the world, there are so many reasons. And when we're done today, I think we'll think, yeah, this is quite logical for a lot of people. There are many mechanisms that come into play, and a lot of them are actually genetic. One thing we need to understand that throughout human evolution, life has been extremely tough, right? You fought for your life. You had to try to find food, no medicine, diseases. You could get killed for anything. It was really tough, and then you died. So we have very strong programs when it comes to fighting for our life. We have no programmings for dealing with a good life. Right? It's like when you have a goal and like, I just got to get there. You have no idea what to do after you get there. So, because life has been tough, only the strongest survivors would make it. And that became part of the human programming. So, what do we do with ourselves when we don't have to fight for our lives? We actually don't know. We get confused as humans. When we don't have something to fight for, we don't know who we are. This is also what we see today, right? Because especially in the West, I'm talking about the West first and foremost now. Because life really works, we don't have real problems for real. Then we have to make them up. We need to find something to fight for, and often we find like bullshit causes because we are programmed to fight. So when we figure out that this is worth fighting for, then we get inspired, right? We can all feel the rush. We're alive, we have direction, we have focus, no matter what it is. Because that is something we recognize as a life form. And without it, without that direction, without understanding that we're fighting for our survival somehow, that can also be through identifying with a cause, we get confused. Now, think that in your brain, you're supposed to find problems. You're supposed to find threats. Because that's how we have survived, right? If you're in the jungle, the person who are the kind of better kind of mapper, like the one who can map out the dangers, the enemies, the dangerous animals will have a better chance of survival than the ones who just like walk through, oh, this is nice, you know, oh, look at that pussycat, you know. So, we are looking for problems when we don't have any. Your brain is telling you that the danger is out there because it's too calm, right? If you're in the jungle and it's calm, okay, you know, the tiger is there, the snake is there, like something is going on. So you will think that there is a threat, but you can't see it. And you will not rest until you have been able to identify where the threat is. This has been a very successful strategy for humans, not just in the jungle, but everywhere. So our brain and our DNA is telling us that there are dangers, because there have always been dangers. Most people did not grow up, and the ones who did died in their 20s. Right? So we're on the lookout for dangers all the time. So when there aren't any dangers, we will make them up because we feel like there is something dangerous out to get us. So we will look at the tiny things and we will blow them up. So instead of tigers, there will be pussycats. And we will turn that into a tiger. When it comes to our emotions, this is also why we overinflate our emotions and how important they are. Because whenever we feel uncomfortable, that becomes the closest we get to a threat. Because we're looking for it. We have to find the enemy. So the enemy can be someone who feels differently from you. In the old days, that person would attack you, you know, with something, with a rock, whatever it is. And you have to protect yourself because you expect that to happen, but it's not. Your brain will tell you that it's happening, and everything will then be lifted to the level where you can identify the threats. And this is why when you look at the conflict level in the West, and you look at it from, for instance, an African perspective, they just like look at us like, what? What? You know, because they can see it. That we take tiny, tiny, tiny specks and turn them into mountains. So our psychology in the West is out of balance because we have a genetic strategy to find the enemy, to find the dangers, and to fight for our lives. And we are told by our genetics that it's there. You just have to find it, so we will. It's the only way we can find peace. So it means also in this landscape, our emotions will become greater. Our tolerance for whatever it is will be quite low. We cannot tolerate conflict the same way we did way back then. Right? Because the level of genetic stress that is constant will kind of like raise the volume on everything. So this is one aspect of it. It's not everything. But another part of this is that we in the West, we have learned through this to expect that everything should be fine all the time, right? Because now we attack even the smallest things. So if you think of when you have big problems, you don't care about the small problems, right? Okay. Important principle, because how many small problems are there compared to big problems? Right? A lot more. So if you think like one big problem, 20 small ones. What happens when you then turn the small problems into big problems? You have a lot of them. Right? This is happening in our brains as part of our survival strategy, which means we live perfectly happy lives, very productive lives. We have everything, and yet we experience our lives being full of very difficult and challenging problems because of this mechanism. And through that, we then expect everything to work. This is why people complain more, and we become more aggressive, because we cannot tolerate the slightest thing, because that becomes big in our brain. And when you look at kids today, and parents have been trying for a couple of generations to make a very interesting experiment, right? Also telling kids that they can be whatever they want to be, and they have the right to be whatever they want to be. And no one should ever tell them something they disagree with. That, combined with how our genetic works when it comes to problems, is a very explosive cocktail. So when we expect life to be easy, we expect to become everything we want to be, and nobody should stop us and all of that, and then life is very different, right? Because we've come to a point where instead of doing things for others, we expect others to do things for us. And that doesn't work. So it means that we have expectations towards life today that is completely unrealistic. And then that becomes overwhelming, because then we think there is so much wrong, nothing is working, right? Because the alarm goes off with so many things, and it becomes overwhelming. And it can be very difficult to deal with. A lot of people get suicidal because they have expectations that are far beyond reality. And they seriously believe that their well-being is the responsibility of other people. And when that is the story, of course we get depressed. Now, I've talked about this briefly before, but we have a misery industrial complex. And I've talked about that all big corporations are part of this, not as a conspiracy, but part of the human psychology. Keeping people unhappy is how they make money. You will only eat shit when you feel terrible. The worse you feel, the more you consume. A person that is happy and has happiness coming from inside needs very little. Then you're into the simple joys and pleasures in life, right? Where you can, sit in a chair and just have a cup of coffee and look at nothing and be very happy. It's when we feel terrible that we want stuff, because that's part of self-medication. So to stimulate people into self-medication, we need to feel terrible. And we have a military or a military complex. They make money when there's a war, right? And just look at it, for instance, when it comes to the gun industry in the States, right? The more school shootings there are, the more they sell. So it's good for business. We have a pharmaceutical industry that makes money when people are sick. They don't make money when people are healthy. We have a financial industry that makes money when things are unstable, so they can suck out more money out of normal people. We have a food industry that makes money when you are unhealthy and when you are unhappy, and then you eat more shit. People who eat healthy, they eat less, and there's less money to be made by the big corporations. You have a cosmetic industry that only makes money when you feel that you're not good enough, right? And the list goes on and on. It's about feeding off of everything we think and feel about ourselves in life that's not good, and they are feeding that narrative because that's how money is being made. When you look at the whole kind of a complex of industries in the world, they need you to be unhappy. So they do everything they can to keep you unhappy and desperate, keeping you just barely functioning, because that's the sweet spot. When you're fighting for your life emotionally and mentally and materially, because that's when you are productive. That's when you buy stuff. That's when you are in this state of self-medication. So that's yet another thing. There is no interest for the modern capitalistic system for you to feel good. And we're told that as long as we buy stuff, we will be happy, but we all know we don't get happy that way, right? So when you have people growing up in this whole system, right? And there are so many strategies in our civilization right now making you more and more miserable. Back to food, right? We all know that there's a lot of additives and chemicals, and there are thousands and thousands of them. When we are unhealthy, we get depressed. Because when we are imbalanced chemically, we will feel balanced, and we will be in a state of well-being. This is why when you go on a detox, you feel better. When you eat healthy, you feel better. We get used to eating shit and sugar because that's also very addictive. So that does not help. And there's also a thing, as I said, like we have stopped doing things for each other. We've been groomed into consumption as a way to self-medicate because we feel miserable. When we feel miserable, we become even more self-centered, which means that we care less about others. I always say that depression is simply an extreme state of self-centeredness, where your tiny problems have become very big. So we are doing this to ourselves as a civilization. When it comes to solutions, we'll get back to that later, but one of the key things is doing things for others. You will find that most people who are depressed never do anything for others. And if they do something for others, it's because it's expected. And that's not actually doing something for others. And I'll go back to that. But do you have any questions or comments?
Yes, we have one question from the audience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when it comes to suicides, I'm not going to point out or target anything specific, but yet Norway is at the top of the world when it comes to suicides, and I think it's like 9 men a week that commit suicide.
Mm-hmm.
And the only country that's above Norway is Japan, which also has a tradition of suicide. And so that's one thing, but it's also very interesting when it comes to Norway and depression and a lot of medical.
But let me just answer that first. I have explained why. Because the more pleasant life we've got, the more depressed we become.
Yeah.
We think that we will be happy if everything works. We get depressed and suicidal because we only have genetics to fight for our lives. And the thing is, like, to survive, The strategy we've had as humans is to work together to achieve something. As a consumer, you're not achieving anything. And when it comes to how we create these kind of happy chemicals, it's by achieving goals together with other people. It's the most meaningful thing we can possibly experience. Consumption is personal. It's disconnected. You're not achieving anything. And you know it. And yet you're told that this will work and it's not working. So the fewer problems we have, and when there's a kind of like, it's not like the worse off we are, the happier we are. I'm not saying that. But there is a line when life is too simple, that you do not understand who you are or what to do, when you don't get a sense of achievement with others, you'll get depressed and suicidal. So when you look at the countries where you would expect people to be the happiest because we've got everything, that's where people kill themselves because of this. And many people today feel they're not achieving things together with others. And they feel that the expectations are only about them. Right? So we need other people in order to produce the kind of happy chemical bath. So in countries, for instance, where they now are up and coming, you will see that no suicides. There may be a few, right, because of mental illness and emotional illness, but in general, the better off we are, the more depressed and suicidal we get. It's lack of purpose that is recognized by our genetics.
So it's also a correlation between that and isolation, because
Yes.
Norwegians are typically...
Exactly, because
people.
we consume, we don't have to achieve something with others. Now, Norway is an interesting example. Now, Norway as a country used to be poor. People had to fight for survival, and they had to work together, right? And then they found oil. And all of a sudden, they didn't have to do that anymore. And this happened too fast. So going from doing everything together, taking care of each other, sharing what they had, working to achieve a better kind of standard of living, they're all consuming and sitting there and being lazy, and it's happened too fast. And we become depressed because it's not about how much we've got, it's about a sense of purpose. When we don't feel an active kind of sense of purpose and direction, we will get depressed. So this is also why it's easily fixed. And we'll get back to that later. Mm-hmm. Anyone else?
Yes, we have another question in the audience.
Yes, I wonder, because I made this experience to, when there is someone who says, okay, I'm going to commit suicide, so how to estimate, is it only this person will really commit suicide, or only says I will do it but will not do it? So how to react in this situation? And I mean, I know how a professional would react, but I have no idea what to do in this situation.
Right. I think when it comes to people saying that they want to commit suicide, often that is them reaching out. They want to connect. It's not like they want someone to understand how they feel. And that's a starting point. I think when someone is reaching out, we have to get involved. Right? We can't say, well, that's just your journey, you know. We incarnate together, and we depend on each other. And you can say, oh, well, this is an interesting challenge. How can I assist? Because if you think that it's not about feeling sorry for, it's about someone who's completely lost a sense of purpose, how can we then work with that and inspire that individual, right? So it's not an easy fix when someone is in that state. Sometimes, as we know, they will need professional help, they will need medication because they've reached a level where they're kind of the chemicals in their brain are so overwhelming that they can't see any way out, right? So it's not like a hug and a meal will fix it. Then they need professional help, and I think it's extremely important also, and I'm glad you brought this up, because often when it comes to spiritual people and religious people, right, we think, well, we should do it without professionals or medication or whatever, and just, no. Those are also part of the tools, right? Everybody is good at something. And I'm all for the use of all forms of medicine. That includes natural medicine, pharmaceutical medicine, all professions, because they are necessary. And I think also if you are present, also spiritually, you will connect to what will actually assist this person right now. And sometimes that would be a professional. It could be psychiatrist, whatever, and also get them help, because as hopefully all of you know, there are, of course, emergency services for people who are close to suicide. So one should always take that seriously. But sometimes when people say, I'm going to commit suicide, if you listen, you can actually detect whether they mean it or not. Often when they have made the decision, they're calling more to say goodbye. When they talk about committing suicide and present it almost like a threat, they want to be stopped. And then more see it as a way to gain power over your emotions. It's like, help me, damn it. So it's a sort of blackmail involved, because that works. So it's a way of trying to hook you, because that's all they've got, right? But no matter what it is, we need to respond, and we need to assist, but it's important that we don't necessarily buy their story, right? Because, and I know many people feel this sounds harsh, there is no such thing as a victim spiritually. We create everything ourselves. But often we don't realize what we're doing to ourselves. That's a different thing, right? We can spiral down. It's just like, for instance, when people overeat. It's just, a few pieces of candy, a little bit here. Well, I was just hungry today. I'm celebrating today, so a little piece of cake, And many people, they don't stop. And they get bigger, so, well, I'm a little bloated today, aren't I? Well, I retain water, right? It's all of that, and all of a sudden, you're 300 pounds, and you're obese, right? And then you suddenly realize, oh, I'm fat. When it comes to depression, it's the same thing. When it comes to everything we do to ourselves, we often are not aware of that downward spiral and how we are feeding that narrative, our ways of thinking, and what we do in our feelings. And all of a sudden, we're in that basement and there's no way out, right? So it's important to understand that we do this in so many different ways. It's not, our feelings and emotions in the state of being suicidal is not exclusive to this. So we all need to assist each other. But spiritually, if we just go into that for a moment, suicide is a strategy that does not work for two main reasons. Life is a rendering of your own consciousness, which means your consciousness is your exact point of spiritual evolution and your karma, which means everything you experience is an extension of you. It's an extension of what you're studying, an extension of your own resistance to life, which means life is simply exposing you to your own curriculum, right? That is the only thing that's happening. So wherever you go, that's where karma will be. I've talked to so many people who've experienced this peculiar type of manifestation where they have a life and they feel, I need a fresh start. So they move to a different country. And after a while, they notice that, oh, that person reminds me of that person I had back home. My friend there is exactly the same, but a different hairdo and, different clothes. It's very similar. At work, I have kind of the same colleagues. I'm drawn to the same people. I basically have the same cast with a different look. And then they notice that the same conflicts have manifested, the same problems and challenges have manifested. Because wherever you go, that's where you are. And life will begin to render and mirroring your process. When we understand that there is no way out, evolution happens whether you are in this body or somewhere else. We can learn to deal with it. When we're saying we're 100% responsible, this, whatever you are experiencing, that's the rendering of your exact point of evolution. And the only way you can move is by learning and growing and healing. There's no escape. What happens when we leave a lifetime due to suicide? This is basically hitting the pause button. And then when we leave that lifetime, we immediately understand what we've got. It's like, that wasn't smart. It's leaving in the middle of a lesson. So normally we would just get assistance to balance ourselves, and then we can look at like why this didn't work and what we can possibly do differently, and then into a new incarnation we go. And although it's obviously a new body and maybe a new place, it will be experienced exactly the same. As I said, the same when someone is going to a different country and they realize it's the same life manifested all over again. It's that. Because wherever you go, your consciousness will be vibrating. That's what you're broadcasting, and that's what you will be manifesting and creating. And when we fully understand this, we recognize that suicide is not actually an option. Because we are in the middle of our studies, it's about getting a better study technique. It's about understanding what life wants when it's trying to show us different things. And for us to grow out of the self-manipulation that is part of our civilization, because it's really our current civilization that is the problem. How we pull ourselves down, how we manipulate ourselves with self-medication, how we have created this collective illusion that life should give us and accommodate us and understand us and do things for us. Well, it's actually the opposite. You're only here to be given the opportunities and be given the tasks. Remember, for you to grow karmically, it depends on your interaction with life. It's what you do. It's what you accomplish. It's who you are in life while doing what you're doing. It's never about other people. Right? And our culture has got that backwards at this point. And it makes it very difficult because our brains will then go into a depressed state. And most people today are depressed. They're just covering it up through consumption. If we took the self-medication strategies, I mean like all of them, away from everybody, right? That includes, shopping, entertainment, drugs, overeating, addiction to whatever it is. It could be religion, it could be sex, it could be like all of these strategies. People would be absolutely desperate. You're only happy when you don't need anything. And we relate to everything around us as a way to compensate and try to balance how we feel. It's our civilization. And part of spiritual growth is to begin to realizing this and then take responsibility and learn what to do. Depression and being suicidal is easily preventable, but you have to do the work, and we'll get back to that in a while.
Online, Aki asks, why are the punishments for suicide in religions so strict and bad that going to hell? And even in modern spirituality, it's often talked that suicide will trigger massive amounts of horrible karma and that kind of thing. What does that really serve? Where does it come from?
Well, religion is about mass control. It's about you not having the right to make your own decisions, right? It's about submission. Suicide is an act of free will. And that is considered an evil thing. If you have free will, you should only use it to submit to the religion and the rules and that God. So from a religious perspective, it's that. It's one that gets away. So in most religions, anything connected to free thought, free will, and individual healing and unfoldment will be considered something negative. It's growing into a complete dependence on the belief system and trying to practice it and prove yourself as being worthy. That's what you should be dedicating your life to. Suicide is the opposite of that. It's basically saying, fuck y'all, I'm leaving, right? And so that's not very popular. So it's just that. It's anything connected to the individual being in their own power. And for instance, in many religions, kind of trusting yourself, listening to your inner voice, finding your path for real is frowned upon. You're not supposed to do that because that's the work of some evil, whatever it is, right? So it just comes with that whole thing. And I think in many kind of spiritual cultures and paths, they've just adopted the same thing, not realizing that if you try to zoom out a little bit, now our science world is just beginning to understand how big reality is, right? There are billions and billions of galaxies, all containing billions and billions and billions of stars and planets. Most likely, there is life on trillions of planets. And then we have dimensions, which one now is starting to realize that is real, and that can be infinite amount of different dimensions, also containing life. So when it comes to incarnation, you incarnate so many times, so many places. The linear way of thinking loses its meaning. It's simply about you as spiritual essence and consciousness unfolding in trillions of different ways. So think of it as having to go through every possible variation of everything as part of you mapping out yourself in relationship with reality. Reality not being limited to this planet, to this life form, this dimension, but everything. Which means, of course, you will commit suicide many times. You will do this, you will do that, you will do absolutely everything, and you will learn, you will study. There is no point in saying that anything is wrong because you're going to do it anyway. No matter what it is. Sure, you've probably been there, you've probably done that, and you will again. And when we've done something, we do it again from a slightly different angle. Just look at our own lives, how much we repeat. And every time we repeat, we've moved just a tad. Enough for it to be slightly different, but still the same. And we do this continuously. So my point is that we learn. We're self-learning, self-growing, self-healing beings. And whatever we go through, we learn. And we don't even have to be aware of it. Just look at kids. They're just being themselves, interacting with life. They don't have a strategy, yet they learn how to walk, how to talk, how to do this, how to do that. Right? So if we do something that is not productive, at some point we'll figure it out. And when we figure it out, we understand it. Often when someone tells us, don't do that, we don't understand why. Often we still have to do it in order to figure out why it didn't work. And we have the freedom to do so. There is no such thing as punishment in the universe. Every spiritual being assisting. All we do is looking at, well, now you're in this spot. What's the next step? What are the opportunities for love, growth, and healing in this point? And then we try to assist. And whatever that individual chooses, well, then they're in that point. And then we just look at how can we assist there. Because everything is about that growth and unfoldment, and it can happen in infinite number of ways. So there is no right or wrong. There is no punishment. There's also no reward. There's just life expanding indefinitely, and you're part of it. So suicide is then just a variation, but still a strategy that is very unproductive. And our civilization at this point is very unproductive in so many ways. And this is just like one of the effects of what we're doing to ourselves. And I think the suicide epidemic in our part of the world should be an inspiration to have a look at what the fuck are we doing to ourselves when people are becoming suicidal, when they live in societies that should make them happy. And when we start pulling this apart and dismantling it, we see, no, our society is actually not about making us happy, it's about making us miserable, to feed the enormous machine of corporations and money and politics, whatever. So we have to learn how to grow past that. And it's not even difficult. We just have to understand that all these strategies that we're seeing around us in our civilization are highly addictive. All self-medication strategies are addictive. And they're trying to make them addictive, right? Just think of our gadgets, right? Most people have a TikTok brain at this point, right? We have no ability to focus for more than a minute. Right? I talk to so many people that think that TikTok videos are far too long. They don't have the patience, right? And they can't watch a movie. That's too long. They will just sit there and like zoom to get to the good parts. Like, what? You know, we're doing a lot of strange things to ourselves. And all of them are making us deeply unhappy and disconnected. And it is affecting us biologically, and it's affecting our brain functions. So there are ways to grow out of this. So just keep tuned. I'll get back to that. Yes?
We have a question from Elizabeth in the audience.
Yeah. First, I'd just like to mention this book called Collective Suicide, which really touches upon the first thing you said about how it's a bunch of people getting together, all want to commit suicide together, and of course they end up not doing it because they're happy being together. But
Exactly. Finally, they had like a purpose and a common goal.
Exactly.
And the feeling of that's what it took. Yes.
It's a wonderful book. But it was a question about this, I don't know what to call her, spiritual figurehead of some sorts. And she's kind of nicknamed the suicide catalyst. Because she refers to suicide as sort of a pause button.
Yeah.
And of course she's being criticized for this. And I mean, I don't know if it's a reference to this or whatever, but I was also thinking about how historically a lot of religious communities have committed collective suicides. Mm-hmm. And could you just touch upon this somehow?
Well, I think the last part, that's just power games and mass manipulation. So I think we have to keep that separate because people can be brainwashed into anything, right? So, but back to the pause button thing, yes. You know, the thing is that we should all be a little bit suicidal. Not being suicidal is unhealthy. And what do we mean by that? It's being connected to all our options and all our choices. Because we should every day choose to be here. You don't have to be here. You can commit suicide at any moment. And we should be aware of that. So that, yes, I actually choose to be here. When I add everything up, that's my choice. And I think that's an important conclusion as well, because we can feel, oh, it's so terrible, I want to kill myself. But if you start looking at your life and see, that's an option, that is often what it takes for you to keep moving. I've talked to so many people over the years who were able to survive their own childhood and childhood traumas because they were suicidal. Because they knew through that they had control. I can actually end this. They're not in control, I am. There is a way out. So by being suicidal, they were able to feel, I'm in control. That made them relax, to understand that this is happening, but I have a choice. So it's the same thing, for instance, in hospitals, when patients are given control over their pain medication. Most, and like the big majority, they will actually use less. Because knowing that they can increase their pain medication whatever they need to, it increases their pain threshold. Right? When you're not sure if you can get it, you need more because you get afraid. It's the same thing. The thought of suicide can be medication for your pain. Knowing that that's an option, but I choose. So I think any sane person will contemplate suicide quite often. Not as, oh, I'm going to kill myself, but just think about it. It will be there in the back of your mind, and many of you will realize that, right? It's kind of there, that, yeah, I could do that. Most people are able to think that thought and not be afraid of it. But it actualizes that we choose to be here. Remember, you chose to incarnate. It can be difficult sometimes to accept that. Why would I choose this? Because it's your exact point of evolution. It doesn't mean that it's easy. It means this is where you study. Everything you're experiencing will represent your next step spiritually. And from higher up, it's all you want. So you want the potentials, you want the healing, you want the growth, and you just know you have to go through a lot of learning, which means we have to change, we have to adapt, we have to become something else. And we want that. That's how evolution happens also spiritually. So we always know that we have a choice. And we should actively choose everything. It's so important today that we actually choose our lives. That we want the life we have instead of always dreaming of something else. Right? Back to what young people have been fed, that illusion that you can become anything. Just think of the expectation you can have. If you're told you can be anything, well, I want to be a big star. I want to be on stage and everyone should admire me. As if that's your right. And then you get disappointed because it's not happening. And then you become a victim because you feel terrible because that's what you deserve because you're so valuable. Right? When we have an expectation that is beyond what we're able to manifest, that can pull us into deep depression because, again, there's a lack of purpose and a lack of achievement. This is why, for instance, you can have high-value individuals that are very productive, committing suicide. And why is that? A lot of successful people commit suicide. You say, why? For the same reason. Their expectations are up there. Often ambitious people are extremely ambitious. And they feel they have to get there as part of their self-medication strategies. I always say that ambition comes from pain. It's a strategy to try to balance out a pain. Someone told you that you will amount to nothing, you're fucking worthless, and you think, I will show them. And that becomes an obsession. And you define where that is, and you have to get there. And often you won't, because you've created this enormous mountain. Just about, I have to get to that top, or else. And because you're not able to get there, maybe you can go halfway, you can still have like great success, but it means nothing. Because we've created the expectation. Right? So when we create an expectation that are kind of out of reach, we will become very unhappy with the result. And many ambitious people, they feel absolutely worthless because they're not able to reach their kind of astronomical expectations to life and themselves. So one technique, of course, is to lower our expectations and want what we already have. People who are happy for real, they only want what they have because they realize it's not about what I have, it's about who I am. And then you have everything you need because you're in a state of love, right?
We have a bit of a queue, so I'm going to take
Yep,
one
good.
online first. Tony asks, what directly can we do to assist somebody when they're in that deep victim consciousness? Because it's so challenging to get through. And Tom also asks, he's not been suicidal to that point, but knows it's very dark down there as soon as we get down there. I have experienced a key, like, how do you really get through to people?
Right. We've already talked about professional help and all that, right? So when someone when they need that, bring them to a facility, make sure they get what they need, right? Okay, so we don't have to repeat that. Now we'll talk about everything else. Now, when someone's lost a sense of purpose, and they're also in that state where their own problems have been inflated to a level where they seem like overwhelming, although there might be just tiny problems, right? But it feels big. The number one thing is actually do something for others. Be part of the world. We need to understand this is not quick fix. You need to have a training program. So if you want to get involved and you want to make people feel a sense of purpose, it's not about telling them that they're like wonderful. That will not help. Okay? You can change the brain chemistry in many different ways. One of the more effective ones is actually physical training. I've had patients with chronic depression, and my instruction has been, number one, walk barefoot outside where it hurts. What happens then is that the body chemistry will change. Normally, a person, if you just try this, if you walk outside, and not on the grass, but gravel, it has to be slightly painful. So walk outside and just learn to do that. Normally after 20 to 30 minutes, you will start sensing that your brain chemistry has changed. Because think of reflexology. Right? You will get that continuously and it will affect how you feel, because also that pain will make you feel connected and it will open you up. And when you start feeling connected to the ground, it will balance whatever kind of abstract stuff you're dealing with. Because remember, depression is that you have your proportions wrong. You've made something very big that is this tiny. So you need a correction from life. So just working with your brain chemicals that way is actually, it works. 2, diet. When you're depressed and when you are helping someone with depression, completely eliminate sugar, chocolate, candy, all sorts of refined carbohydrates. So sugar, baked goods, candy, like all of that, right? If you take that away, that will also stabilize the body chemistry. So clean foods, high proteins, good fats, often also a high level of fat, will help stabilize depression. So clean foods, and like cut out everything, like alcohol, whatever it is, everything. So you can get help from a dietitian, but that also helps because it influences the brain chemistry and your overall feeling. Remember, It's like your whole sense of reality is a little bit out of balance. So when you have strategies that will force your brain into balance, that will continuously kind of balance and rebalance your chemistry. Now, not only walking barefoot, but training, physical training, weightlifting, stuff that is hard. You need to do things that are hard to do. Why? Because back in the day, we were physically productive. Everything we did was physical. So we can trick our brains into a sense of purpose by, for instance, lifting weights. We have to do something that is hard. So it can be biking, mountain climbing, whatever it is, but you have to use your body, and it has to hurt, and it has to be something that your genes will recognize. So anything kind of heavy and demanding will also help your chemistry to be kind of balanced, right? But for these strategies, you need to have a long-term investment if you want to help. So beyond that, as I said, we are hardwired to feel a sense of purpose when we achieve something with others. Most people are depressed. They have a sense of disconnect, right? They're not part of everything. Force them to be part of something, but don't take them to parties. That is not productive. That's not achieving anything. They have to be part of productive work where they can see, oh, I was part of making this happen. So it can be working in the garden, in the family. If one has a family that is somewhat functional, let them take part in everything that a family does together. Often there are always projects, the house, the cabin, whatever, but there are projects, things that need to be done. That creates a sense of achievement, even though that person will hate it because they are in a state of disconnect, but their DNA will understand it. It's over time training oneself to be part of something in where we achieve something. Okay? So that teamwork, it can even be when you work out with someone, like sports training, when you're doing it with someone, you can get a sense of achievement. Yeah, we really had a good workout today. So drag their sorry asses to the gym and, work out together with them. It tricks our genetics into feeling that we've done something important, right? It's like we went hunting and we slayed an elephant, right? It's that. Because it was hard, but we still did it, right? That also helps. Something that is extremely important, though, is doing something for others. Now, this is a whole thing, because our self-worth is transactional. It's very important that you get this. You have no self-worth in yourself. Worth is a price tag someone will place on you based on what you contribute and how much value that represents to them. So you have no value except the value you contribute. So when you don't, you have no value and you will feel worthless because you are. And, oh, I feel so worthless. It's not something someone can give you. It's the result of what you contribute. So we are all worthless to start with. We might add value to our families because we're so cute and everybody finds us, well, that's an added value, but that will fade, right? And again, when parents tell kids, oh, you're so valuable, blah, 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 because you're so wonderful, you should be whatever you want. We start believing that we have value. You don't have value. You give it value, and how much value you give will decide your price tag. That's your self-worth. It's transactional. It's not about how you feel. It's basically like, for instance, when people try to rate, like, am I a 5 or am I a 10? And they go, I'm a 10 because I feel like it. It's not what you feel about yourself. It's actually, do other people find you attractive based on their preferences? That's how it works. So, if you want to feel valuable, add value. It's not about you. We have to understand that we have no value. It's only the value you bring to others in a way that they can recognize and they decide how much that is worth to them. People who feel valuable are people who bring a lot of value. They understand what other people need and they give that. Right? When people say, like, I give of myself, very often those people, they know that they give what the other person needs. It's not, they don't give what that person wants necessarily, but what is needed. When you give something that is needed, a wonderful thing happens. Connectedness. And this is the big difference between giving based on what you think are the expectations of the world and when you give to add value. So, one of the deepest ways to feel purpose is to give, like being of use to someone else, right? But that only becomes real when the other person recognizes it, recognizes the value of what you have given or the value of your presence. So if you want to achieve that, it's never about, as like, giving what you have. It's about giving what's needed and learning that. Because that's when you connect. When you give, because it's expected, right? Oh, there's so many things I have to do, blah, blah, blah. You're actually doing the opposite. You are in this power game with yourself. And you are using others as props so you can play out your own misery, your own play, where you give so much and nobody cares. Because you're not giving what's needed, and then there is no connection. We've all experienced this when we are truly present to someone and we're able to give what's needed, the heart opens in both, right? We've all experienced this, and we are present to each other in that exchange. That is purpose. Then we know I have contributed to someone else's growth. I have contributed to the evolution of the universe. And as beings, we recognize this. That is purpose. So when you don't give purposefully, it is worthless because nobody's growing, nobody's healing, nobody's expanding their consciousness. And it's learning to do that. And often depressed people, they have no clue. But they can learn. But part of the program, if you want to assist someone out of depression, is this. First, when they feel, oh, no, nobody likes me, oh, I'm so worthless. So, yes, you are. And explain why. Ask them, how much value have you brought to others? For real. Right? How much value have you been told that you're bringing? Because if nobody shows you, you ain't bringing it. Because it's not about what you think. It's about what they experience and how they value you and your presence. Okay? This is a key element. Because that flow, when we connect with others, it fills us with a sense of purpose. It opens the heart. We're filled with love, and we are definitely not depressed and suicidal. So this is also what we need to do in our own lives. Everything I'm saying now is also how we prevent it in our own lives. Because one thing I think is really important that we all understand. Our whole civilization and everything you're surrounded with can make us all depressed and suicidal. Right? And even on a spiritual path, we can end up feeling this way because we are manipulating ourselves through all these structures in our civilization. Our entire civilization is extremely unhealthy. Again, when we created this misery industrial complex. And it's all over. It's controlling everything. The only way to be a good person is by being completely miserable and unhappy and consumed, because that's where we're supposed to be. Even our educational system educates people into becoming miserable consumers, because that's how money is made. Right? So we're all part of it, and we have to grow out of it. I've met so many spiritual seekers that are deeply depressed, right? But we can work our way out of it. Also by what we talked about today, which are also part of spiritual practice. But we have to take responsibility, because there is nobody else responsible for our journey, right? And we need to completely rip out the expectation that anybody owes us anything, that anybody is there for us, that we should be seen and recognized because we need it. It's all crap. Those thoughts will bring you into depression, because then you have an expectation that cannot be met. Right? But we can all work together. We can all connect. We can all be productive together with others, also spiritually. But we need to practice. Many people in the spiritual communities are also kind of loners. Right? That's not very healthy. Even when you have a spiritual practice, that can make you depressed. It's important to be part of communities, doing things together, be part of your neighborhood, do things for others. When you do things for others, where everyone can see it has value and you can see it, you will feel wonderful, and you know it. So also in spiritual communities, instead of just focusing on yourself, focus on others as well in their healing and their well-being. We are hardwired in this life form to respond to this type of behavior. And when you apply just the strategies, I've told you it's virtually impossible to get depressed. You have to fight really hard to fall down into that basement. But I say it's like, think of it as a downward spiral, and you end up in this very dark place. Well, you got there, so we can also walk out. So you have to do the things that you stopped doing, right? Those are the steps. And I've explained a few of the steps. There are a lot more things we can do. I may get back to that. Yep.
Christina in Estonia shares that she's in the middle of a dark night of the soul and in her healing journey, and it's painful and dark, but she also knows that the only way out is healing and learning. So I just wanted to share that, because that was very much in alignment with your
Yes.
talk tonight. And then we have a question from Sara.
I would like
yeah.
to comment this first, though. Many of you have heard of a dark night of soul. And dark night of soul is the experience that the light is gone. Right? It can be very depressive, very, very lonely. And people can also get suicidal, but it's more existential. It's the feeling that I've come to the end. There is nothing. Now, it's actually not the end, it's the beginning. And in each cycle of learning, you will go through dark nights of soul. It's a natural part of our life studies. Now, I explain this process very simply. When we are exposed to learning, we are in the light, because then we can see things we were not aware of, and we can interact, and we can therefore do things we didn't know previously, and we're studying. But we're bathing in this light. We're bathing in the space that represents a consciousness that we are growing into, right? That's often where the healing is. That's where we feel embraced. Everything's expanding. We learn, we grow. How do you know that it's you? And not just the space you're in holding you up. You need darkness. In the darkness, you become the light. And you can only maneuver through the power of your own light. that's when you need to navigate. Because it's in the dark, you see how much of that light has actually become internalized. And because we've stayed in the light for so long, we have forgotten that we need to be the light. Because there's so much light that we don't have to. We're used to the light being given to us. So first, we're placed in darkness, and then we stay there until we realize, oh, I have to switch on my light. I am the channel. And from that moment on, you begin to practice what you have learned, because it's a process where the purpose is, what did you learn? When you are in a space that is only you and your skills and your consciousness, life can see, what did you actually learn? When we exposed you to this, when we taught you that, and you said, yes, I get it, now show us. Because that will be the light. And when you move through the dark night of soul, as many do, and many experiencing depression are not aware of them moving through dark night of soul. But it's an absolutely necessary state where it's about the activation in you of what you have learned, what you have been given. Because remember, in that state, it's passive. You are receiving because we're giving to you. We're showing, we're accommodating, we're applauding, we're nurturing. But then you have to do it yourself. So we remove the light and we sit there and wait until you switch it on. And then you have to switch it on everywhere until you vibrate the same light. Because the learning and the process is that you should be able to be the light source. You should be able, when you have internalized everything available to you and given to you in that space, your light will fill the same space. This can take time. We go through this in our smaller cycles, but also in greater cycles. And the greater the cycles are, the more brutal dark nights of soul will be experienced. But as you grow spiritually, you will learn to appreciate dark night of soul. Because that's when you get to test, what did I actually learn? What sticks? What am I able to do when it's up to me? When I'm to activate the light I'm channeling. When we understand this about the dark night of the soul, we look forward to it. Because it's not a punishment, it's not dangerous. It's simply the activation of wisdom in the individual without any assistance. And at some point, you'll kind of get it. Or once you're like, yeah, you learned something, there's still something left. And what you didn't learn, that will be kind of represented. And that will be part of your study program from that point on. But it's interesting because dark night of soul and depression will, in the brain, be experienced very similarly. But spiritually, there are very different concepts. So those of you who are in the experience of dark night of soul, or have been in it, or will experience it, because that's all of you, please understand what it is and what it's for. And the more you utilize your tools, the more you unpack yourself and dare interact with life and do things and experiment and unfold, and just like, what's in me? That's how you grow out of it. And you will also then realize more about your own light. Because when you're in the light of the universe, you're not able to differentiate that light from your own. In the darkness, when it's only your light, you can see it yourself and you get to know your own flow, your own uniqueness, and your own unique skills, because when you have to do it on your own, you discover kind of your take, your variation, your energy flowing through whatever it is you're doing. So that's the purpose of it. And to me, it's a beautiful process, but I completely understand how painful it is. And I assist a lot of individuals going through that phase and making them understand exactly what I'm talking about. So what we try to do is to assist in that activation, but at the same time making very clear that you had to flip your own switches. We will not do it for you because now you're supposed to know. And often for people to do it on their own, they have to be desperate. So the darkness works. So even depression, when we lift it down to normal depression, that can also be productive. If we decide that this is enough, and we begin to take steps to become more productive and more connected and less self-centered. Any more questions?
Yes, now we'll go to Sarah in the audience.
Maybe you have covered it, but now we talked about depression, but I also heard that some also take their life because of anxiety. Is that just another side of the depression, or does it have another?
Yes. Often anxiety and fear can drive people into depression, into suicide. Sorry. It's still based on thoughts and emotions and stories around reality that are simply not true. And the way to balance ourselves are still the same. Any type of imbalance can pretty much be corrected the same way. We need to relate to reality physically, right? And so all the strategies about what we can do and assist ourselves, that is helpful. And also interacting with others. The interesting thing is when it comes to how interaction and doing things for others and together with others, why that assists our brain is that our reality as a human changes based on other people. Remember that to survive, we'd have to work together, right? So how people do things, their sense of reality, and how to kind of calibrate into becoming a team means that we have to adapt in many subtle ways so we can feel we're on the same page, we're on the same team, we'll do this together, right? Because it means we have to listen to each other. So, for that to happen, we need to have the same understanding of reality. We have to have the same value system, the same understanding of the task at hand, the same understanding of how to get there, right? So, when we are a little off, we're too much in our own imagination, we're created stories. That is not compatible with that. So when we have a group of people that are more productive, your brain will adjust to that collective sense of reality. And it doesn't matter what type of imbalance that we're talking about. When we have to adjust to others to achieve something in order to survive, this is how we do it. So yes, it does really work, and it's very simple.
Okay, let's see, we had, Sara in the audience first.
Yeah, so one thing we haven't talked about, and I also know is a big issue, is the relatives or the closest individuals to the people who have committed suicide. They are usually the ones who have problems afterwards, and I was wondering how we could support them or help them get through it, or maybe show them a different perspective.
Yeah. I think, well, all families are different, right? And often the question is, when people commit suicide, is like, why didn't I see it? What could I have done differently? I think it's important to make people understand that our journeys are our own. We're not responsible for others. So when someone creates a downward spiral for themselves, it's not just due to one thing or one person. It's them, right? And yes, we want to be there for each other, but we're not responsible. So in families and, you know, and also friends, they do their best, but we need to understand that we're all focused on our own problems. We all have our own stuff, right? So it's not like we have one depressed person, the rest are just happy, so they just have this, you know, affluence of time and energy and happiness, and they should see this person. Most people are struggling in different ways. This is why people self-medicate. So most people are in the midst of their own stuff. And this is why they can't see other people and necessarily connect to their needs. Many people who end up committing suicide, they're not communicating. So everybody assumes they're fine because as long as someone's not communicating, we're just like, oh, fine, right? We do this also with kids. Our psychology is such that the kid who communicates the most will get more attention, not the quiet kid, because he's fine, right? So when we're not communicating, we assume that that person is fine. So it's important that we do not kind of blame ourselves, and also that we can support friends and family and assist them out of that feeling of guilt. So it was that person's choice based on that person's experiences and stories, and you're not equipped necessarily to see it or understand it. Right? Ultimately, we are all responsible for our own choices, no matter what they are. Right? So I think it's having conversations in that direction, but also where they are spiritually. I think it's important to understand also, as I said, that we go through all sorts of experiences. This is yet another type of experience, and the journey never ends. We go in and out of forms, in and out of different types of incarnations and lifetimes. It's just an enormous organism. That is the journey. So also try to assist them in understanding that, yeah, that was just a variation. You know, we all do stupid things. That may not be the most productive thing, but the journey continues, and that individual still exists. And often when we leave a lifetime, we will continue to communicate with our loved ones because we never disappear. The kind of greater families of souls that we are connected to, we often call them clusters, basically spiritual individuals coming together, and they assist each other in their journeys and incarnations and studies because they have kind of similar karma. So they end up being like a school class, right? And they have a lot of group projects and all of that. So when we incarnate with someone, they're part of our cluster. So when they leave the lifetime, they just continue their work in the cluster. Again, remember, there is no punishment. And we all fuck up things all the time. So often when people commit suicide, they recognize the mistake before they're dead. And there are so many examples of people who have kind of survived suicide attempts. Many of them just describe exactly that the moment I did it, I changed my mind. Because then all of a sudden they got that perspective. So the most common thing is that the moment you it's like, oh fuck, you know, again, you know, for some people they do it again because they get to the same point and they have the same reaction and they learn nothing. But then they just do it until they learn. But it's quite common that it's complete like face palm, right? When you go out in suicidal, oh, I'm so depressed, because on the other side, you're not. That belongs to the journey and the form and how you respond to your exact point of evolution in this form. So once you're free of it, you don't feel the way you do. So you can just look at it and say, oh, fuck, you know. And then you get the bigger picture, right? So that's the most common reaction. So when we leave a lifetime, we're always fine. There's like hardly ever anyone being completely stuck. Because once you're out of a lifetime, it's like waking up from a dream and you become yourself again. So it is for everyone. But often, you know, when you go out from suicide, you do have this type of approach where you always suddenly realize what you did like. And you understand that, oh, I basically skipped class. I incarnated to study this, and then I, you know, that's the observation. And it's fine. And often from the other side, you can have a sense of humor about the whole thing, right? Because we all fuck up all the time. It's part of the journey. It's part of figuring out what works. And you can say, well, obviously I learned that didn't work, right? And then you move on. If you need to heal, then you do that. But spiritually, we're always in a state of balance. We're always happy. We're always productive. So when someone leaves a lifetime, no matter how they do it, they're still there, but not here. They're present in the cluster, and they will then be part of the support team of those who are in incarnation. So, you know, when someone leaves and they're very depressed and suicidal, they're not that on the other side. That belongs to this level, right? So it's just dress up. You know, when you dress up in a human body, and it's role play, you know, and you kind of perform and you live out everything, but it belongs to this type of life form and this incarnation. Once you're out, you're back in neutral, right? And it's like watching Meryl Streep. Like, she can do absolutely anything, right? She can sing, dance, act. She can be anyone credibly, right? And when you watch her act, it's like, she can do that too. Yes, she can. And the moment she's not acting, she's herself. That's basically what it is. So she can play, you know, depressed and suicidal, but the moment the director says, cut, you know, she's not suicidal or depressed. It's kind of like that. So we're all, when it comes to it, extremely productive. We want to grow, become ourselves, and heal, and expand our awareness and love so much. And we know that we have to get rid of whatever stands in the way of it, which is our own resistance. And being confronted by it is tough, right? It's not like we always get depressed and suicidal, but we all know that life is challenging. It's hard work. It's difficult, and that's okay. But as, you know, a spiritual traveler, you also connect with, we get results. We do grow. We do expand. We get to a more mature consciousness, right? But sometimes we commit suicide, and sometimes we don't. Sometimes we do this or that. We do a lot of things that don't work, but over time we figure it out. So also for families and friends of those who've lost someone to suicide, I think it's important to also bring in the more kind of spiritual aspects of them being fine. They're always fine. Everybody's fine the moment they leave a lifetime. And then they will kind of go back to work and continue being part of the cluster. And it's always fun when you go out, no matter how you go out, you will always be greeted by your whole class. You know, because then you're out of a lifetime, and yay! You know, it's like a welcome party. You'll be reintroduced to everyone, and you know, get up to speed, and everyone's, you know, because you've been in a lifetime, so you're a little groggy, and you know, need to get yourself back on track and remember who you are outside of a lifetime. So it's always a joyous experience, right? Religions are not only mistaken. They're very unproductive in that, oh, going to hell, this or that, oh, someone's made a problem. It's not like that. You're greeted by your class which is the family you always wished you had. A family that is so big and everybody enthusiastically love you no matter what you do. And support you, nurture you, that's what it is. And they will greet you. No matter how you go out of the lifetime, because they are just the same. When you have a slightly higher level of consciousness, you know that, yeah, okay, happens. We just focus on where we're at and then how to grow and heal from there. And the school class is there to assist each other and take part in each other's journeys. So no matter what happens, they will love and support you. That is what happens when we leave lifetime. And then when you become yourself, then you can be a productive mirror for those still in the incarnation. And I've said so many times that I've seen, for instance, family dads die, and it's first after they leave their lifetime that they start behaving like a dad. They can be there. They can be present. And often families will experience it. You know, you can still interact with your loved ones and with their kids and everything. And it's quite calming, right? When you have had a loving relationship with someone, you can still feel them and they will communicate and they're present because they are. Life never ends, right? So whether you go out of a lifetime, you know, in a car crash or that you die of natural causes or suicide, whatever, in a big picture, it doesn't matter. It's still variations, right? Suicide is just not productive because you're leaving class in the middle of the lecture. But that's all. We need to look at life as this wonderful opportunity to explore and to learn about ourselves and about life. And yes, it's tough. It is challenging. But without it, we don't grow. We don't heal. As I said, the current civilization we have on this planet is extremely unhealthy. Giving people false expectations, telling them lies about what life is about. We have created an economic system of business that only thrives when we are miserable. Talk about being stupid. That's not smart, right? And our civilization will almost come to an end because of it. But it's up to each individual to snap out of that and understand how we can take the wheel and kind of backtrack and reverse all the actions that are making us depressed. Because the best way to avoid depression and suicide is to prevent it by having strategies. Now, we've talked a little bit about how you can backtrack and what you can do. In addition, spiritual practices are extremely important, as also a way to prevent. If you meditate daily and you truly connect, right? If you have a spiritual practice, it can be yoga, whatever, but it has to be a practice where you connect, where you go in, where you open up and you let your flow come through. That will also balance your brain, it will balance your emotions, it will balance anything. Because basically what is flowing through is the essence of what you are. And the better you get at it, the more balance you will feel. So when you combine that with having strategies that can, from the outer world, also balance your body and your mind, those two angles will dissolve what's in the middle, and that's your brain. But spiritual practices are extremely important as a kind of also long-term way to move past the horrible and destructive collective strategies we've chosen as a civilization, right? Because then you lift yourself above it and you're saying, I'm not this. I can choose whether or not I want to include this. And you will not let yourself be manipulated into spending your entire life self-medicating in 40 different ways at the same time. It takes a more kind of awakened consciousness to move out of the self-medication paradigm, right? And it doesn't happen by itself. We need practices that can then go in and change our brain, our nervous system, and the connection between brain, mind, and consciousness, right? This is also one of the reasons why I try my best to inspire people to have a spiritual discipline and practice every day, because it does something to you also biologically, not just spiritually, right? And if we apply healthy strategies, we will assist our brain into staying in a kind of chemical state that will make you look for the opportunities, that will see life as an abundant place of opportunities and fun and exploration. And you will not be pulled down simply because you don't get what you want. And you understand how to create value in your own life and for others, right? You understand how to create purpose. And it's not difficult. It's like doing things for others. We all know it. When you've done something for others that creates this sense of connectedness, that's what life is about, right? If you do this on a regular basis, you will not get depressed, right? So instead of having like 40 different like self-medication strategies, have 40 different strategies that can create balance, right? We need to replace the self-medication one because they don't work. They're designed to make you miserable. They're designed to keep you there so you will consume more. So we need strategies that will make you stop being addicted to everything and to connect your flow and experience that state where you're alive and happy and joyful and loving. It's not even difficult. But we need to kind of raise our consciousness above this collective civilization. Because as I said, like as part of the civilization, unless you are in spiritual work, you are deeply depressed. You're just covering it up through self-medication, right? And for many of you also, if you made this experiment, as I say, if you imagine taking away everything you do to numb yourself, and when you really look at it like as an entertainment, all of that basically distracts you from being present to yourself. Many of you will get afraid just by the thought of it. And it means, yeah, that's what we're talking about. So we need strategies. Any more questions?
Yes, well, let me just check that. We have a contextual question.
Yeah.
Relating to how money and that sort of industry of misery that you talk about fuels everything. Is this planet unusual in the way that we have the money exchange and that sort of consumer-driven lifestyle?
When you understand that absolutely everything you can possibly imagine, and then some, exists in every variation possible, there will be billions of versions of this. But I've talked about before that humans are quite special in their ability to disconnect, to live in disconnectedness. And when you look at how humans treat everything, it's from the understanding that nothing is connected. Now, quantum entanglement is something that has been discovered, and in the world of physics, when it's now starting to expand, and then understanding that everything is connected for real. And they're beginning to move in that direction. But for the most part, until now, humans see everything as separate. Just like look around, like everything is separate, and the human culture says everything is separate. Nothing is connected. This is also why when people get illnesses, that's just random. It's not connected to anything. Humans are so bizarre when it comes to this. Yes, this is one of the most specific aspects of the human life form that other intelligent beings observe with curiosity and amazement. Because any intelligent life form understands that everything is connected, for real. And humans have not yet discovered it, so they treat everything as separate, including themselves, and the consequences of what they do, right? We know so much about how we influence this planet and the environment and other life forms, and still we just continue. Because, no, switch channel, I don't want to see that anymore, and then it's gone, right? We don't, as a life form, connect to anything unless we absolutely focus on it. So, yes, humans are quite special when it comes to this. It's not common among life forms that they develop with this type of disconnectedness. But humans will, over time, evolve into beings that understand connectedness, because otherwise humans will not survive. Absolutely. Mm.
All right, we have a question from Thea in the audience.
And Paul? Okay. I'm wondering, do the animals do suicide?
If animals commit suicide, yes.
Okay.
It's not common, but all animals can commit suicide. The thing is that humans have not looked at this because, of course, humans have decided that we're the only thinking beings, right? All life forms, they think and they feel and they're aware of themselves, and they have connections, you know, they have a sense of family and social life, and they go through their journey because we are exactly the same. So sometimes, yes, animals can become depressed and suicidal, and they can kill themselves if they understand how to do that, right? But what often animals can do is that they can eat stuff that will be poisonous. They can jump off of cliffs. They will do things like that.
But why?
For the same reasons, exactly the same reasons, that they, on their level, in their journey, experience themselves in the same way, that they've lost a sense of purpose, and that they're not connecting. It can also be a sense of loss. For instance, many examples of dogs committing suicide after their family have died, right? Many animals are also there where they can actually switch off. Some humans can do that too, especially among indigenous people. It's been observed that when they decide to die, they can die. We have it in us. So we have all sorts of strategies around this, but suicide among animals are quite uncommon, but it certainly does happen, yes. Mm.
Okay, I think, let's see. We do have one question that just came in online. Leo in California asks, how can we navigate in a world and interact with others when people live in this collective illusion? I consider myself spiritual, but I also withdraw, and I prefer being more in solitude because I find it hard to be around people that are asleep. How can I be more in service and help others, even when they don't want to listen?
Yeah, I think interacting with others, in general, it's important to never have expectations, because then we will also get very disappointed, because people walk their own paths. They have to deal with their own karma in their own way, and as people, we have no idea what karma they've actually, been exposed to, and where they are in their own study program. So the most important thing when it comes to interaction with others is accept them exactly the way they are. Love them exactly the way they are. Be unconditional in your presence and your support and your nurturing. And always see what you can give, right? How you can bring value, how you can do something that you recognize will bring growth and healing in some way. It's not about convincing, it's not about making people's life better. It's about being that presence where you understand that you're being productive in assisting life in the greater evolution of existence. But often when people ask me, you know, this civilization is quite primitive, how do I deal with that? And I say, well, the same way you interact with flowers. Flowers are very primitive compared to human, but do you see that as a problem? Of course not. And it's because with humans you expect them to behave a certain way and you project a lot of stories. And then that becomes what you look for. That's what you interact with. Well, with a flower, you don't do that. No, you know, and still that flower can be a complete bitch, but you don't see it and you don't care because you look for something else. Right? And then the exchange can just be loving because you see past everything else, because you don't care. So, interacting with the different levels of consciousness is never a problem in itself. And I think when we are in an open, loving consciousness, we are able to interact with absolutely everybody because we're more curious about what's your journey, right? Where are you at? What's your next step? How is this meeting between us somehow a part of the journey of the both of us? What is to be exchanged? What are the potentials and how can I contribute? How can I add value? No matter what level we're talking about. Right? So when we drop the stories and the expectations and all of that is simply every meeting with someone, no matter what life form, no matter what level of consciousness, is kind of the same thing. It's a meeting between two kind of particles of God in different levels of unfoldment. And the exchange somehow comes into being to benefit both. And it's looking for that and being in that state. Then it will always bring value. And again, when we are curious instead of judging, instead of having expectation, we're just like, this is interesting. And looking at them and their journey and trying to be in the bigger picture, our presence will always be productive. Because it will never be about how can I get something and they're not giving me anything. It's always about how can I co-create, right? And seeing each meeting as a spiritual exchange between particles. And just be there, right? Then every interaction is interesting and happy when you connect to what is actually going on, which is always every action, every manifestation, every meeting is about peeling away something that is not true, peeling away a misunderstanding, so that what is can become clear and pure for each time. And we have to relate to each other to achieve that. We are each other's tools and assistants and coaches and whatnot to achieve that. We can't do it on our own. We need others in order to grow. We need others in order to heal. So the further we go spiritually, the more we understand the value of exchange. And this is why we then begin to give for real. Because we understand that this is how I grow. By adding value. By connecting, by contributing to the expansion. Because I only expand when I show that I'm able to handle more. When I'm able to make more flowers grow, then my garden will expand. So we give, and we look for the potentials. So we stay curious, and we make everything interesting. And we move into this state where love and growth and healing are really the only things we focus on. And we try to bring that into every interaction. No matter the level, no matter the form or dimension or action or whatever happens. Because behind all of that, it's still just that. It's a divine exchange between particles of God with the purpose of unfolding even more of what is. And the more we move in this direction, the more we grow out of any form of depression. And we certainly don't want to commit suicide because we want to be present, and we understand that I'm present no matter where I am. I'm not limited to my body, I am present. So if I'm present here, I'm present there, and I'm present to myself, I'm present to the universe, I'm present to the process and unfoldment. And we understand that will not change based on my form, because my presence is not limited to form or dimension. So we want to be present because we can't wait to see what life will show us next. The opportunities we get to be part of healing and growth in ourselves and others. So we become the opposite of suicidal. We just want to be more and more present to ourselves and others, and we love more strongly, and we learn to connect more strongly. And it's not possible to be depressed when you connect to all life around you. It's simply not possible. Because then your brain will be flooded with chemicals of purpose, of happiness, of co-creation, of achievement. Everything that will make your brain feel that everything is purposeful. And this is part of why it's important to not only have spiritual practices where we withdraw, right, and move inward. I see life as a spiritual practice. And we need to transform our lives into an ongoing spiritual practice. And when we do that, we stop self-medicating. Because we self-medicate because our lives are so out of balance. When we work with our lives as a spiritual practice, and we gradually feel that we're learning how to do that, we will be in balance at all times. Life will be exciting and loving at all times. And self-medication will disappear. Depression will disappear. All of that, it's not part of your reality anymore. But it has to come from inside. It has to be you giving, you being responsible, you being the vehicle, right? So always give and always love. And you will discover that life itself is purposeful, and you're purposeful, and all interactions are purposeful when we just let go of the primitive stuff. And then you move into a state of presence that will always uplift you and uplift others. Everyone can move into this state. But it takes a lot of work. It doesn't matter like how deep you are in darkness. Reality is what it is. You have disconnected from reality. You have to move back into it, no matter how painful it is. And the steps I've given you is a start. It's not difficult. But, as I said, if you walk down to that basement, inside you know the way out, although you tell yourself you don't. Life wants you to be happy, to be productive, to be in a state of overwhelming purpose. It's our civilization, how we are together, that has made us all move out of it. So, you are the one having to do something about it. So if you're in a good state, have practices that will prevent you from moving into this collective consciousness depression. And if you're in it, you have to be disciplined. But by applying spiritual disciplines and also following my teachings and practicing what I teach, over time, you will move into a state that is consistent and permanent. And you will be in the driver's seat. And life will be wonderful and exciting and full of love and purposeful exchange with life itself, without breaks, without pauses. You are a spiritual being visiting in a form. As a spiritual being, you vibrate God itself. And this is where you go when you do spiritual work for real. No matter your starting point, no matter how hopeless you feel, with the right practices, you can go there. And if you study with me, you will. So please share this video with anyone you feel it's appropriate for, and try to inspire. We are beings of light and wisdom. And when we are depressed, we just temporarily forgot about it. You can move back into the light, into the wisdom, into the flow. And you can remember your divinity. You still have to take charge. It's all up to you. But life will assist you. Beings will assist you. Your cluster will assist you. And if you want to, I can assist you too.
Thank you so much, IKYA, for this important evening. We will have links to some resources if you or anyone you know is having suicidal thoughts. It's important that they reach out for professional help, and to all family and friends, we can all together help each other past any dark night of the soul. And thank you again, all of you, for joining us both here at IKYA Center and online. And we look forward to seeing you next Monday, 19 o'clock, 7 p.m. Oslo time for IKYA Live. And please do like and share this video with anyone who might benefit. Follow our channel, ikya.official here, subscribe on YouTube, and join us on social media, ikya.official on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. And perhaps the most important thing to remind you of this evening after such a deep teaching is that the ability to study with IKYA is available anytime. So here on our YouTube channel, also at our website, ikya.org. And not too long from now, on the 10th of October, starts a new course with IKYA using mantra in meditation and in your spiritual practice. IKYA Mantra Collection 5 begins the 10th of October and has a free open house for absolutely anyone to join, both online and here at the center, on Tuesday the 19th of September. So if you have any questions about studying with IKYA, that's a fantastic opportunity to directly ask questions of the teacher and to see if studying more intimately with IKYA is right for you. So again, thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at our next IKYA Live.